So let's raise the big questions. I'm going to divide this by first talking to two people who in a way have dealt with both Mr. Modi and diplomacy in different guides. Has India's global image taken a beating? What will it take for the government to course correct? Polarization politics at the heart of the row? The questions first to Salman Khurshid, former Minister for External Affairs and Congress leader, and Zafar Sareshwala, activist, businessman, close to Narendra Modi over the years. Appreciate both of you joining us. Salman Khurshid, your first reactions. Do you believe that the reaction of the Islamic world has been overboard, or did India get this horribly wrong? If we had acted much earlier rather than 10 days later, things could have been sorted out.
I really regret that something like this has happened. People on such a good path with the Arab countries and indeed with many other countries. And actually something like this to have come in between is really tragic. I think there was the inability or reluctance to understand.
Mr. Khurshid, give us a minute. We are just trying to get your audio right. There's a little bit of disturbance, but give us a minute. We'll try and get that right. Meanwhile, Zafar Sareshwala, you want to respond to that same question? Could this have been, if the government of India, if the Modi government had acted on day one, broken its silence, this could have been resolved more easily? Do you believe that the government dilly-dally, delayed 10 days, gave the opportunity in a way to critics of this government to say that this government doesn't act against hate speech?
Rajdeep, I was in two places in last 1 week. I was in Russia, where the Russian government had hosted economic summit with the OIC countries. It was in the city of Kazan. I was there, and I was also in Moscow just a week back. And although this Nupur Sharma thing had not come up, but because I was the only one, or there were one or two more people from India, the only question there raised to me was what's happening in India. Because it's not Nupur Sharma, which is something happened now. Since last so many days, we are seeing, on the TV, things are happening. People were questioning me that. Because I'll tell you why. That with Mr. Modi's ascension, India's position had taken a leapfrog across the world, even in the OIC countries, and this summit happening in the backdrop of war. And there were contingent from 72 countries, heads of state from 58 countries were there. I was there on the invitation of the Tataristan president. Even then, people were wondering, and I met a lot of
non-Muslim. What were they wondering? No, what were they asking? What were they asking?
Yes. Rajdeep, a very important person in Moscow, he heads one of the largest pharmaceutical companies of India. He heads Moscow and Nordic nation, I'm not naming. Once he said that, मैं तो आपको देखता था, हम लोग तो मोदी साहब के सपोर्टर हैं. Zafar bhai, ये क्या हो रहा है? ये हिंदुस्तान में क्या हो रहा है? A non-Muslim Hindu living there. Same question were asked to me by a lot of people from Arab nations, much before this Nupur Sharma thing happened. When I came to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, after that, again, this was the question raised by non-Muslim Hindus. Because Rajdeep, in the top positions in UAE, in the investment banking industry, that's my field, most of the top positions are held by Indian Hindus. And they were asking me कि यार ये हिंदुस्तान में क्या हो रहा है?
नहीं, आप कह रहे हैं हिंदुस्तान में क्या हो रहा है? आपका रिस्पांस क्या था? मैंने आपको पूछा, if the Modi government had broken its silence on day one, if Nupur Sharma had been acted against in some way, made to give an apology on day one rather than procrastinating on 10 days, what would have happened? Give me your answer. What did you say when people said ये देश में क्या हो रहा है?
हाँ, बिल्कुल. यानी ये वो लोग हैं, राजदीप, इसलिए मुझे ऐड करना है. ये वो लोग हैं जो भारतीय जनता पार्टी के सपोर्टर हैं, दुबई और अबू धाबी में. वो कहते थे कि क्या हो रहा है? तो यस, बिल्कुल. और ये मैं वहीं था और ये नुपुर शर्मा की चीज हुई. उसके बाद तो मेरा लोगों के सामने जाना मुश्किल हो गया था.
You're saying?
I had no answer कि हो क्या रहा है. और सबसे खतरनाक जो था वो ये नवीन जिंदल था. यानी राजदीप, पीपल वर शोइंग मी हिज ट्वीट्स कि यार फॉरगेट अबाउट अब्यूजिंग द प्रॉफिट. एक पार्टी का, बीजेपी का प्रेसिडेंट दिल्ली का जिस किस्म की लैंग्वेज इस्तेमाल कर रहा था, जफर भाई इसका कोई जवाब?
No, he is not the BJP Delhi president. Naveen Jindal is a functionary in the Delhi BJP.
No, he is an important functionary. He's an important
No,
functionary.
no,
of
government
BJP.
says he's a fringe figure. The BJP says he's a fringe figure. Government says these are fringe figures.
And not only that, दूसरे बहुत सारे नाम मैं नहीं गिनाता, उनके ट्वीट मुझे वहां लोग दिखा रहे थे, दुबई, अबू धाबी में, और ये मामूली लोग नहीं, जो बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट हैं. और मैं आपको एक बात बताता हूं, क्या लोगों को लड़ रहा था.
In English,
yeah, because I have been going to these countries for almost more than 30 years.
Right.
I had seen how we were viewed before. And you have to give credit or marks to Mr. Modi, because he had taken the position, and with his ascension after 2014, India had come to a position, or I would say coming of age, because earlier we had oil trade and these kind of things, people investing in Indian companies had never happened, the kind of amount which has come in last 6-7 years.
Okay.
And
yes.
These people, the Nupur Sharmas of the world, have hit Mr. Modi and nobody else.
Okay.
Because he is responsible to take India's position to this level. Even in OIC countries, when I was there,
You made that point. You made that point. Let me turn to Salman Khurshid. Salman Khurshid, you want to respond? Zafar Sareshwala says that, look, Mr. Modi had taken this country's position to a high level, but even in the Gulf countries, we were building relations with UAE, Saudi Arabia, signing bilateral agreements. Along comes this instance, and now you've got Islamic countries, in a way, some would say ganging up, others will say just expressing their anger. How do you see it? Do you believe that if the government had acted on day one, this could have been contained?
Well, I think, of course, that's what was necessary, and that's what would have happened. I just believe that this has come because of fundamental misunderstanding about the attitude and sentiments of Muslims in the world for the Prophet Islam. I mean, I think that there is a bit of lack of understanding of what the significance of the Prophet is to Muslims. And if this had been understood and appropriately responded to quickly, I do believe that this matter could have been taken care of considerably.
But Salman Khurshid, there will be those, sorry to interject, there will be those who will say, look, Nupur Sharma, according to the government, is a fringe element. She does not represent the government of India. She doesn't represent India.
Not get into this. This is just no. I know, but this will make things worse. If these are the kind of arguments we're going to put to the world, we will become the laughing stock. Please, whatever she represents the government of the day through the political party that has brought about this government. Be that as it may, whoever she wants, I think there should be no explanation, just a categorical apology and put an end to this matter. This is not something that should invite further debate. This is something that should be brought to an end quickly and with as much sincerity and honesty as possible. That's my opinion.
What more could, Salman Khurshid, what more could the government have done? The government could turn around and say, look, we've got the BJP to suspend her. We've issued statements committing ourselves to our pluralistic, secular beliefs, that we believe all religions are to be treated equal. There are those who are saying that we've responded angrily to the Organization of Islamic Countries, calling them narrow-minded and communal.
Rajdeep, this is no time for getting angry. You have to show a sense of sensitivity and understanding, and then to tell the world that these are fringe elements. Come on, even we don't accept that explanation. To something wrong, it is wrong. We accept the person, and we believe it. We do not want to hurt anyone. This is being said. Let it be emphasized. Don't give explanations about who did it and who is responsible.
So what? No. So what more would you expect the government of India to do? Let's be very clear. What more do you expect them to do?
Listen, I believe this is no time to react to anyone. Even if somebody is, for our point of view or the government's point of view, is speaking out of turn. So long as we take the attention away from the derogatory statements that were made that should never have been made, make this matter not by arguing against Muslim people are taking. We must not be clever and say to the fringe elements, just put an end to it. It is important both for India and for the world. It is important to Muslims and for Hindu-Muslim solidarity that this must be put to an end as quickly as possible.
Okay, you're saying the answer is not to respond angrily, but just put an end to it. Zafar Sareshwala, do you believe that the Modi government is genuine when its reach out takes place? You mentioned how you believe that the government's stock has risen in the Arab world. Are the people willing to now make a distinction there between the Modi government and the BJP or those who are seen as the Hindutva hotheads and the government of India, or somewhere down the line they will now say that, look, there is no difference, this double track approach will no longer work?
No, Rajdeep, even now people look at Mr. Modi and his government differently and the BJP differently still. So I think now still there is a time, and this whole Hindu-Muslim divide which is happening, and more it's happening on the television screens every day. I think this needs to stop, and the government of India needs to intervene and stop this. And maybe again, this whole...
So no more silence. So no more silence. No. In the past, Mr. Modi has been silent. In the past, the belief is when you have people within his government, Ramzade, Haramzade comments made by people who are in government, the accusation is the government doesn't act strongly enough, doesn't speak out early enough. You believe that's a lesson that's been learnt. Am I correct?
Yeah, in fact, this removing of both these people, Nupur and this Naveen, has given some semblance that yes, government is acting, but they need to do more.
Okay, let me leave it there. Zafar Sareshwala, Salman Khurshid joining me. Let's widen this. Why does West Asia matter to India? Remember, everyone knows a huge part of our oil needs are met by imports from the Gulf. The figure, in fact, even now is as high as 60%. Here is another reason. The highest remittances globally come to India thanks to its diaspora. An RBI survey in 2018 said the most amount of money through remittances came from the UAE at 26.9%, US came second at 22.9%, Saudi Arabia next at 11.6%, then Qatar 6.5%, Kuwait 5.5%, Oman 3%, then finally the United Kingdom. Of the top 7 countries from where remittances came, 5 were from Gulf nations. So that gives you a sense of the economic costs involved in keeping this relationship going. What are the diplomatic costs? Joining me now, KC Singh, former Secretary MEA, he served in that region. Vivek Kaju, former Secretary MEA, he served in Afghanistan, which has also come out strongly against India today. Gentlemen, let's get each of you, KC Singh, your first remarks. Do you believe that the diplomats are being made to do the damage control for the manner in which our politicians tend to shoot off the hip and make statements that are interpreted as hate speech and blasphemy and worse?
Rajdeep, the problem is deeper than that. I've been writing for some years now, saying you cannot put your domestic politics in one silo and your foreign policy in another. It will carry you only so far, and a stage will come when the conflict will occur. You can't have a majoritarian Muslim baiting agenda at home and go hugging the rulers of these countries and think they'll look the other way. They will mostly they'll look after their interests. Emiratis are interested in weaning you away from Iran. Saudis are interested in doing the same. But when it comes to an issue, I think this is the Salman Rushdie moment. This is not a normal baiting of Muslims in India. It's gone to the religion itself. It's gone to the Prophet. So like in case of Salman Rushdie, once it reaches that level, now it's a religious issue. It is not a diplomatic or political issue. And therefore what happens is it hits the masses. Don't forget, in 1980, over Salman Rushdie's book, a mob in Pakistan overran the American embassy. And even the military stood by and the police stood by, couldn't save them. So therefore, when it reaches the masses, even the rulers in highly autocratic countries will be forced to act. And one last point, where did it begin? It began with Qatar. You see the differences which are there in GCC. You have UAE and Saudis aligned on one side. Qataris have been leaning towards the Iranians, they share a gas field. And Kuwaitis have largely been with them. Bahrain is with the Saudis and the Omanis are largely neutral. Now, once Qataris opened the flank, there's no way Saudis and the Emiratis keep quiet. The reaction came very late and is relatively mild compared to what the Qataris did. But then it goes on to Iran, it goes on to Taliban, it will go on to Indonesia. You see, now the entire Islamic Ummah and the Islamic countries, the regimes feel that they have to take a stand.
No, so
And therefore, this was bound to happen. When you allow, let me ask a simple question on the fringe. When the fringe comes to your channel, do they come as the fringe? They come to speak on behalf of BJP, not BJP, the government. They are always nightly fighting and defending the government. So the fringe has been spokesman for the government. You don't get government spokesmen on your channels.
No,
And if they are the fringe,
I take
then
your,
really,
I take your point,
why
Mr.
do the
KCC.
main
I just
accounts
want,
of top leaders follow them?
sure, I just want to make the point. We've asked the so-called fringe to come on the show. The BJP spokespersons are not even coming because perhaps they're too embarrassed to defend themselves on this issue. I've also tried to have a haircut, which was a bit of a fringe haircut in my own way. But Vivek Kaju, more seriously, do you believe that the Arab countries their governments are under pressure because, as Bobby Naqvi was pointing out of Gulf News, there was pressure from below. There were lots of people on social media angry over these remarks on the Prophet. Did we underestimate the scale of Arab anger simply because we seem to have a good relationship with their leaderships, forgot that the masses out there will get angry when you make a statement on the Prophet?
Rajdeep, the fact is that whatever may be the differences in the Islamic world, and they are deep and abiding, there is one issue on which all Muslims have a common feeling and they all unite, and that is on reverence for the Prophet Muhammad. So if there is a perception that the Prophet has been insulted, then it evoked almost atavistic feeling among all Muslims. Now, that is something that I do believe that should have been understood, because if I know correctly, Nupur Sharma's remarks came on the 26th of May. On the 30th of May, the Vice President went out on his travels and he was to reach Qatar on June 4th. Now, the question that I've been asking myself is that once this matter reached the social media, it was inevitable that it would inflame passions in the Muslim world and, of course, in the Gulf countries. And since the Vice President was traveling there, what was the Minister of External Affairs doing? Because I do not, Casey can correct me if I'm wrong, but I, in my diplomatic experience, do not remember a situation when the Vice President is on a visit, on an official visit, or whatever nature this visit became, in Qatar, that the Foreign Office of that country calls in the Indian ambassador and issues a statement asking for a public apology.
No, are you saying that we should have acted? No, are you saying that therefore, Mr. Kaju, we should have acted preemptively? That on day one after this statement and that it went viral on social media, the government of India should have acted, the Minister of External Affairs should have acted. Is that what you are saying?
I'm saying that I'm in fact questioning in my mind what was the Minister of External Affairs doing. I mean, he knew the Vice President is traveling there. What was his response? And I'm sure he was being informed of that this is the reaction which is building up. So that is one point. The second point, which is a more wider, is that, and you mentioned economic interests, etc., that India has in the Gulf. Of course, India has deep economic interests. There are remittances, there are energy supplies, there's trade. But let us not forget that there is a mutuality of interests. It is not one side. The Gulf too has deep interests in India. We are major purchasers of their oil. And they need the labor, Indian labor. So it is not one-sided. Therefore, my last point. Therefore, this is a time when wiser heads must come in both from India and the Gulf, and this incident must be put behind us. And the government has started a process by the ruling party issuing a statement by taking action against Nupur Sharma and Jittan. And now is the time when we should, take this process forward, have a quiet engagement if necessary, and put an end to this. And I do believe
Yes.
that the governments, unlike Pakistan apart, governments of the mature countries would want that to take place.
Let me ask you, KC Singh, in conclusion, who do you hold therefore responsible? The suggestion from what Mr. Kajju is saying is that you've also got to look at our diplomacy that perhaps reacted too late. You've also got to, of course, look at the silence of the political class that now the government calls them fringe elements. Do you believe that's enough, calling these elements fringe, now doing this quiet backdoor negotiations? Will that be enough, given, as Mr. Kajju is saying, the kind of interest, mutual interest that exists between the Gulf and India, between the Islamic world and India today? Or will this continue to haunt the relationship for a while?
Rajdeep, for the last 4 or 5 months, particularly since the UP election or just before that, you've had people openly ask for killing of Muslims, for taking armed action against them, for various kinds of things. So, there was a degree of discomfort, which your earlier speaker, earlier sympathizer of BJP said, discomfort was already there. There was only a spark that was needed. And I think what the fringe did was, when the fringe are urged on, and you use them, and you think it's helping you with your divisive politics, then the fringe goes overboard. They don't know any limit. The youngsters speak some English, but they don't understand religion or history or the sensitivities of the world. So they had it coming. As I said, you cannot put your domestic politics in one silo and keep doing what you want here, and you think you can present the statesman image abroad. You see, that barrier is gone. That's broken.
Right.
To repair it, I think the Prime Minister has to take charge. He has to shut down all these shops and all this rhetoric. And unless it's coming from him, we haven't heard from him. Whenever these things have come up, we've not heard him. He has to come out and put a stop to it. And I'm sure if he does, the countries will understand. They're looking for a signal from him.
Okay.
They are not going to buy this argument, this is BJP and it's not the government. Well, BJP is the government and he's the BJP as far as the world is concerned.
Okay, let me, those are very strong words. I think both of you are sending out as seasoned diplomats. Hopefully someone out there will listen. Mr. Kajju, I just have 30 seconds. If you were to give one piece of advice, yes, therefore, to this government, what would it be, given how it's gone horribly wrong?
Look, there is a difference between Muslim minorities and when it comes to the Prophet. And therefore, I do think that the ruling dispensation needs to inform their spokespersons and members of their party about sensitivities of different religions, including Islam. Equally, I think as far as India is concerned and the wider world, there has to be a greater sensitivity about Indian or what is now commonly called Indic religions and our sensitivities. And that is why I'm suggesting a process of dialogue that is needed.
Okay.
Because after all, my last point, after all, there has been a movement in the UAE which has shown sagacity, something that was unbelievable. I served in the UAE between 79 and 82 last. 1979-82, and I could not imagine that there would come a time when the ruler of Abu Dhabi would give land for temples and gurudwaras, etc. But he has. So there has been a movement. That movement must be taken forward through a process of dialogue, and of course, comments on the Prophet or any other personality which is revered of any religion must stop in the daily crossfire that takes place on our television.
Let's leave it there. Vivek Kajju, KC Singh, two very sensible voices from the world of diplomacy, sending out strong messages in a way without raising their voice, which is perhaps the way to do it. I appreciate you joining us. Hopefully someone out there is listening to you.